WellPod at DC on Riot Radio.
From meditation, stress management, safer substance use, and sexual health, we will literally talk sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Join us to dive deep into some student health questions. We'll learn about wellness together, try some coping tools, and meet some interesting people.
Your co-hosts, Heather and Craig.
Perfect blend of Campus Health and Wellness Center and Sal's.
Each week, we'll DIY a wellness tool together.
And then nerd out and dig into the science behind how it works.
Email your health and wellness related questions to wellpod@durhamcollege.ca to be discussed anonymously on air. Welcome to the WellPod at DC.
Welcome to the WellPod at DC, live from the Media Hub on riotradio.ca. We are back for season 3. This feels exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you again, too.
So, of course, I'm going to ask all of us to do something a little bit playful. So I'd love the Riot Radio crew here and Craig here. Can you hum the bass line from Vanilla Ice's hit, Ice Ice Baby? Can you hum it? Bum, bum, bum,
I don't know if I want to admit that I can.
That you don't know it, right? But did you know that that unforgettable bass line was actually sampled from Queen and David Bowie's 1981 hit, Under Pressure? Feeling heavier than ice at times, this week we're going under pressure and exploring the sexual, social, and academic pressures of college life. A 2021 article, Who is Coming Through the Door? A national survey of self-reported problems amongst post-secondary school students in the Counseling and Psychiatry Research Journal, explored a national survey of over 8,000 Canadian students and found that 95% indicated being overwhelmed and feeling pressure throughout their academic journey. Southern Utah University state students may feel pressure to conform or fit in and be accepted. When people are unsure of what to do in social situations, it's natural for us to look around, find cues for kind of what is or isn't acceptable. And certainly in new environments, you may feel more inclined to change yourself or your behaviors in order to feel a sense of belonging. This week's student question was, this is my last year in my program. I don't really get along with my group of friends that I've been hanging out with. They're into hooking up and partying a lot. Just don't seem like my type of people. Is it too late to make new friends? So today we're going to talk about the pressure of hooking up, the pressure to find your groove and fit in, and the pressure to make friends from an evolutionary perspective. So when you're in new situations like college, it's natural to feel like you want to connect and you want to be accepted by others. But this longing can make you vulnerable to making decisions you think will please others so that they'll accept you. Our sexual experiences at college can have elements of vulnerability and pleasure and desire, but for some, pressure, discomfort, and coercion. In a 2011 research study, 7,000 heterosexual college women from 22 U.S. colleges completed an online college social life survey, and 62% of the women stated it was their partner that often initiated the majority of sexual activity, with 7% reporting that they performed undesired sexual acts in order to please their partner. So this pressure also we see sometimes in losing our virginity. It's often the baseline of jokes in many pulp culture movies like American Pie, and this is often known as compulsory sexuality. And this pressure assumes that everyone is sexually active at college, and it can sometimes stigmatize those that are not. However, a 2013 Trojan and Sex Information and Education Council of Canada study found that 27% of college males and 23% of college females have never had sex. A 2019 British survey of sexual attitudes and lifestyle found that a quarter of men lost their virginity at what they considered the wrong time, with a third of women indicating the same. Sexual coercion refers to any unwanted sexual activity that occurs when we're being pressured into any form of sexual activity. So we need to change our societal norms regarding what consensual relationships look like. Leading the change here at DC, we are joined by sexual violence educator and prevention coordinator, Marisa Mei. Welcome, Marisa.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an important conversation, and it falls really well and in a line with Consent Awareness Week, which is being observed across Ontario throughout all post-secondary institutions. So I'm so pleased to be able to be here and to be a part of this conversation.
Important conversation to have. One question that I often find myself having and hearing from students is sometimes not feeling clear on what that consent can look like and feel like. How do I know if I'm engaging consensually with my partner?
Yeah. I feel like if you're asking those questions in the first place, you're already taking positive steps towards ensuring that you are practicing consent. So already having that, like, making sure I'm questioning myself and wanted to explore it. I think before I can answer this question, it's really important that I define consent. So as a part of defining consent, let's look to what does our Criminal Code of Canada say? So we actually have consent laws around sexual activity here in Canada. And so our Criminal Code of Canada, subsection 273.1, defines consent as a voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity in question. So again, defines consent as the voluntary agreement of any person to engage in sexual activity in question. Any conduct short of agreement to engage in said sexual activity does not constitute consent as a matter of law. So like, what does this really mean, right? Sometimes our laws, right? So let's break this down a little bit more. When we talk about consent, it must be mutual, right? So meaning then that all persons involved together are on the same page and they're voluntarily having this conversation about their relationship and perhaps any sexual desires or needs that they may have. And that there's also a mutual understanding that this agreement that they make is ongoing. Meaning that at any time, that even though we've had this conversation, we've agreed, and maybe we're even starting to practice some of what we've been talking about, that we can actually change our mind.
It's not the same every time we hook up or get together, explore.
Absolutely, right? And so failure to establish consent each and every time that you wish to engage in sexual activity, even if it's with the same person that perhaps you've previously engaged in sexual activity with, that in the absence of consent, again, each and every time, it can be considered sexual assault or sexual harassment or perhaps other forms of sexual violence that are, again, defined within our Criminal Code of Canada. Consent is a crucial aspect of all healthy relationships. It involves clear, enthusiastic, and again, that mutual agreement between partners to engage in any activity. So here's some key points that I hope then can actually, now let's get to the response to your question. So then what does it look like, right? What does all that look like? So having that clear communication where, again, both partners feel that they can openly express their willingness to participate, their desires, right? Without fear of judgment, without fear of violence, right? That they aren't going to be judged, right? So that can be, again, a verbal yes. And sometimes, though, we have these conversations and we give consent, though, through nonverbal cues. So that could be our body language. So maybe someone is nodding, their body language, maybe they're kind of moving closer to you, right? So sometimes we also need to be just as aware of our verbal and our nonverbal cues, because there are times, though, where I might be sitting here and being like, yeah, but my body language might actually indicate that I'm uncertain. So that segues into then enthusiastic. That if I'm having a conversation with someone that I like or care about and that I have this interest to explore sexual activities with, that we should be equally excited, for a lack of better words, about the conversation and the possibility of what might come and how we might, take our relationship to that next level. So if the person, as I said, if even though perhaps they're saying that yes, but they're kind of moving away, check in, right? And make sure that, again, that it's a mutual understanding that we are still on the same page. And so then once we've established that consent, it's ongoing, right? So checking in with and making sure that everyone is still feeling comfortable, and by checking in, it allows the person to know, and it gives them that freedom to like change their mind or to perhaps try something new with you, right? And that's really exciting. And then respect is such an important piece of that. So respecting each other's boundaries, respecting each other's wishes and desires, and respecting the limits that they may put on that, and respecting someone if they do in fact change their mind. So if they withdraw their consent or right off the get-go, they say no, that we respect that.
Yeah.
Right? So then what does it feel like? It feels comfortable. We feel safe in the situation. I don't feel pressured and coerced, right? And you had to find that really well at the beginning. There's mutual trust between all people. So again, when there's trust, again, you can then feel that you can communicate in an open and honest way, right? And express those needs. And that all persons feel empowered in that conversation. So again, feeling empowered to have the conversation. We want people to feel just as empowered to say no, but we also want people to feel just as confident and empowered to say yes, right? So how then do you make sure that you're doing this consensually? Ask and listen, right? Regularly checking in with your partner, asking them how they feel, and listen to their responses, right? And be attentive to the non-verbal cues, right? So if your partner seems uncomfortable or hesitant, right, stop in and again check in. Does this feel okay? Is this okay? Right? And then again, respecting what it is that they say. If they do in fact ask you to stop or to change what you're doing, but that's exactly what you're going to do, right? So that just goes then again with the respecting the person's boundaries, and then just continue to educate yourself, learn about consent and healthy communication. And there's certainly many resources available that can help you to understand these concepts better, such as enrolling in and completing the Prep 1000 course that's available on DC Connect. And then we also have a sexual violence first aid module that also provides some guidance and support as well. In the end of all this, just remember that consent is about mutual respect and communication. And if you ever feel unsure, it is always best to pause and continue that conversation with your partner.
One thing that stands out from this conversation as well when we had you on season 2 is really thinking about this as a conversation, that this should be something that it's a comfortable, it's a safe, it's a vulnerable conversation. But I loved in talking with you, if you're uncomfortable to have this conversation, maybe taking a pause and recognizing that then maybe we're uncomfortable to move forward with this activity. Because if we can't even have this conversation, which is such a vital part of this experience, then perhaps taking pause.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. If we're finding it challenging to talk about it, then maybe there's some other areas of our relationship that we want to further develop so that we can come back to this conversation and then be enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, a key word there.
And even beyond the sexual relationship, so much that stood out to me is just good relationship, right? Having conversation and connecting, not to sort of take away from what we're specifically talking about, but checking in with people that
any relationship.
In any relationship, various aspects of your relationship.
I always say, like, practice consent in your daily life too, right? So not just waiting till potentially there is an interest in sexual activity. That the more we practice consent and asking people permission to do things or to help them, even like, hey, may I open this door for you? The more that we practice just having that type of dialogue, it becomes easier to do when you find yourself in a position of having these vulnerable and or difficult conversations.
Speaking of which, some students, what we're noticing is they're engaging in relationships or sexual experiences, and they may be feeling uncomfortable due to a power dynamic. So we're hearing from a lot of students around, like, it's a friend or it's a classmate. Landlords is something that's really been bubbling up lately, of especially if it's a landlord closer to their age. So there's that power dynamic, but also there may be having concerns of, if I say no, would I have to find a new friend group? Do I have to find a new place to live? So what are some words of wisdom that you would have for those that are feeling unsure about how they can express their right and need and boundary for consent?
That is a tricky one, and I empathize with those students who are finding themselves in those unique positions, that navigating relationships in general can be challenging. And then when you add a power dynamic to that, it can be especially challenging. But it's really important to remember that everyone has the right to feel safe and to be respected, no matter who you are or the person that you are having a relationship with, right? Whether that be professional relationships, a teaching relationship, and again with your friends, or perhaps the specific example of a landlord. Really understanding your rights and to know that you have rights, right? You have a voice, and that your feelings and your boundaries are valid, and you have the right to express them without fear of losing your home in that specific situation, or losing your friends, right? So without fear of judgment or retaliation. The law is on your side in the case specific to your landlords, right? Or even if it's a friend who you find becomes now, it's bordering now, this is no longer a healthy relationship because I am in fact beginning to feel pressured, I'm feeling scared perhaps, or I'm feeling intimidated by this person, right? And we talked about that just before, about having that trust and respect as a part of all of your relationships. But the law is on your side. A landlord in that specific situation is considered a person of power, and therefore consent, right? You cannot give informed consent when there is that power dynamic, because there is that real fear of potentially then, if I don't comply, if I don't do what is being asked of me, that there is a real risk here that I might lose my housing, or maybe my rent will be like tripled. And we have unfortunately heard of those scenarios. Consent though, however, it's non-negotiable, right? Consent must be freely given. It is reversible. It must be informed, again, enthusiastic. And it's very specific that you are agreeing to a set of activities or one activity. When you give consent, it doesn't mean like the whole grand scheme of everything that could happen and does happen.
The whole
right?
McDonald's menu.
There you go. I like that. Fries.
Fries. Can you tell us a little bit? What is the FRY acronym?
So you have freely, irreversible. I'm like, oh wait, no, FR. So freely given, respect, irreversible, and then the
FRIE.
Enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic. An S? The S in fries? Maybe it's just fry.
No, it is S. We're going to report back. I want to say.
That will be a goose hunt for our listeners.
Is that the specific that you mentioned?
Specific. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
But I would like to be able to provide an update to that later.
Yes.
You got me on that one. But specific for sure. But I don't know if the acronym in that specific way is
it's a neat way to remember it, though, right? That there's.
If you come visit our office, C106, I have the handout, and I can speak better to that.
Yes.
So as we talk about clarity,
yes,
right, be really clear and direct, right? When you are trying to navigate these conversations, use clear and direct language to express those boundaries. I am not comfortable with this. I need you to stop now, or I'm walking away. Use I statements. Frame your feelings and needs from your perspective. I am uncomfortable when you speak to me in this way. It makes me uncomfortable, or it scares me when you ask me these things, right? Practice that assertiveness, right, about standing up for yourself. And I appreciate that it takes a lot of confidence and courage and bravery to do so, right? But to help to build that, again, practicing with other people that you know you are safe with, right? And then before you then go have those conversations, we really encourage to then, specifically with a landlord, for example, or where there could be a risk of harm or violence, to develop a safety plan. Right? Letting someone know then that I am going to have this conversation, maybe having someone come with you so that you're not the only person a part of the conversation, right? So really exploring safety around then having these difficult conversations. And then when it comes to dealing with those power dynamics, seek support, right? If you feel unsafe or you're unsure, reach out to trusted friends, families, professors, a DC employee, and they can certainly provide you guidance and support. So know those resources, know what your resources are, and familiarize yourself with the resources available to you, such as counseling services, crisis lines, and then our campus student services. Documentation is really important. So whether that be with your landlord or even in those acquaintance or friend situations, documenting your feelings or documenting conversations that have happened, and then like, how did that make me feel, in addition to like, these are the things that were said. Because in the case where you then may file a report, or what you always have the option to do is that then you have that documentation when you're being asked about what has happened, because we can also recognize that that stress can also sometimes make it difficult to remember everything. Right? Or to remember exactly how things happened and when they happened. So in the case of the landlord specifically, who is sexually harassing you, because that's exactly what that is that this is in fact a violation of your human rights. Okay, you have the right to file a complaint with the Human Rights Tribunal, along with the Landlord Tenant Tribunal here in Ontario. And then certainly, again, there are certainly members on this campus here that can even support those processes, like the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So again, just building that confidence, educate yourself, right? Learn about consent, healthy relationships, and practicing that assertiveness. Role play those scenarios, right? Practice expressing your boundaries, right? And you can do that with friends or sometimes in front of a mirror. If you do it in front of a mirror, though, I can almost assure you and promise you it will feel weird and silly, but it works. And so if you keep doing it, it does feel less silly. And it actually, in fact, has been proven to like help to increase your confidence and your ability to navigate. And then self-care, right? Taking like care of your mental and emotional well-being to engage in activities that then like make you feel strong and empowered, right? And just to know them, you're doing these things, you're taking these steps because you deserve respect, right? And it's okay to walk away. Trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts and take action to protect yourself.
Some great strategies.
For sure. So then, I mean, you've mentioned a number of services and supports already, but just kind of to focus in on that, what are some supports available, whether on campus or elsewhere, that you'd like to share with students?
Awesome. Yeah, lots of there. I mean, we have a wonderful campus here, and the employees here, no matter what department, if you go to them with a need and you're asking for help, if it is not them specifically, they will help to point you in the right direction. And one of those places that they may direct you to could include the office and the team that I'm a part of, and that's with the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So as the sexual violence education and prevention coordinator, that I can be a great resource for you to ask questions about your relationship and ask your consent questions. So we also, so even if you're just questioning your relationship, right? I'm unsure if I'm even experiencing abuse or violence, or I'm unsure if my landlord is pressuring me, if this is in fact harassment, that we can have that discussion and help to identify if there is harassment, abuse, or violence happening. And then if it is determined that either of those things are happening, to know that help and support is available, right? So in my role, that I can certainly provide confidential and non-judgmental, survivor-centered, and trauma-informed support. So that can then also include then me taking in your disclosure. So that's someone then that entrusts me, and I feel very privileged that persons do entrust me to share about these really vulnerable and sensitive experiences that they've had. I can provide you then with the immediate emotional support after sharing such a personal experience. Engage in safety planning, and then support with system navigation to on-campus or community supports and resources. And I can advocate for any academic accommodations that you may require, and then to also inform you of our sexual violence policy here at the college that then also outlines your reporting options. So speaking with me, I just wanted to be really clear that speaking with any member of our office or me specifically, it does not automatically prompt an on-campus investigation or a report to the police. Our office is guided by the survivor in the steps that we take and the way that we support them. Right. So the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion is located on the Oshawa campus in room C106, which is just off the pit. And we're also in the Whitby campus on Fridays in the Sal's office. And so we can also, though, be reached by appointment. So if there is a need and you need to connect with us before that Friday of the week, please don't hesitate to reach out to svsupport@durhamcollege.ca for your support needs.
Thank you so much for this very complex and important conversation around consent. So after this break, we're going to be exploring the pressure we feel sometimes entering new environments, whether it's a classroom or the gym. You'll hear from a new guest how we can help find our fit. Welcome back. Here to help us find our fit is fitness coordinator Brianna Christopher. Welcome, Brianna.
Hello.
Hi. So the gym and the world of athletics can sometimes, for some of us, be a little bit intimidating, and we can feel a little bit of nervousness or pressure as we're entering these new environments. Do you see this pressure sometimes as students enter your space?
100%. If you are a first-year student, the gym has so many people in it, right?
Yeah.
We're going into the gym, we're seeing, 80 to 100 people, sometimes depending on the time of day that you're in there.
Yeah.
So it's very nerve-wracking. Gym intimidation is one of the topics that we talk about in the Flex. We want to make it a warm, welcoming, inclusive space where these people know that, when you're not in class or doing open gym or something like that, you can come to the Flex and it can be your second home. You can meet people and friends there and, who have the same hobbies as you. And then you can have a gym buddy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, pressure in the gym is definitely something we see all the time.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but sometimes it's not even just like the pressure of this space or so many people, but your pieces of equipment are like these pieces of art, and I don't even know where to start with them sometimes. Do you have a similar experience?
Oh, for sure. And I was going to say, it's not just students. Like when a few years ago I started going there, and in your mind, right, before you even step in, it's like, what are the machines? Will I use it right? And then, I don't know, in my head, it's like, everyone is in way better shape than I am, and I'm going to be that guy that's like, why is that guy here?
Yeah. What is he doing?
Yeah, right? So But yeah, then it leads to the question I was going to ask is what are some of the ways that a student or staff could reduce that pressure in preparing and so on?
Yeah, that's a great question, Craig. So when we did our change over the summer, so we actually changed over all of our strength and resistance equipment. So if you haven't been to the Flex yet, we have all new equipment, which makes it not only confusing for new students, but returning students. And so they're probably in the exact same boat. So to prep for your gym session, we do have a video posted on our Campus Rec Instagram page that gives you a tour of the gym. And so that'll kind of explain to you, what parts of the gym that you can do your leg day in, your upper body day. If you're looking to do a quick workout, we have a Fit Fast 9, and it's right near the front of the gym. You can't miss it. And so watching this video would give you a really good idea of at least where to start.
Yeah.
Yes. And then from there, because we know this is a big topic, we are going to be doing some videos on how to use this piece of equipment, different modifications and variations you can do with it, so that way people can learn more, because it's really important, so that way they can achieve their goals.
Yeah.
And I notice on most of the equipment, like most gyms, it's got the little instructions, which muscles are being used, how to do it. And I won't lie, some of the times I'm standing there, warming up for it, but really looking at, okay, you do this first, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And at times workers, like some of the Flex crew have hey, can you help me with this?
Exactly, yes. And I always tell my Flex monitors, if you see someone who kind of looks a little hesitant, please approach them, right? We're the people who are there to help you. And so if anyone ever has any questions, definitely ask a Flex monitor. But I'm glad you talked about that little card, because there's actually a secret on some of those cards, and there's a QR code. And if you scan the QR code, it actually tells you how to use the machine.
Interesting to know.
I can look like I'm just checking, checking out my Instagram account, and really I'm watching videos of how to.
No one needs to know.
No one needs to know.
You also mentioned you have like a full range of different pieces of equipment. And I know for myself, sometimes the pressure is needing to do it all. So any tips if when students are just kind of getting started, is there some areas that might be kind of more beginner friendly than others in a sense?
Yes. So beginner friendly, I would say, would be your Fit Fast 9, and that will hit all components of what you want to work for your body. So you have your upper body day, your lower body, all mixed into this one area. It's called Fit Fast 9 because there's 9 machines and it's nice and fast. You should be able to get done that workout in about 30 minutes. And then your next step up from there would be to try maybe the functional space, which is where we have some stretching. We have our TRX bands. You can do body weight exercises. And then even just try the cardio space, right? We have a huge cardio section. And if they wanted to just come in and get comfortable, hop on a cardio machine, do a little lap around the gym, and then ask us some questions.
Yeah, and that was a great tip that I heard from you and your staff earlier when I was getting used to the Flex areas. Like, just come on the treadmill and just get used to the space and warm up to the environment, how you check in and check out. And that definitely was a really helpful strategy.
Good. I'm glad it worked.
You mentioned, too, kind of the idea of gym buddies. And sometimes finding friends, let alone a whole team, can feel really nerve-wracking. I know some students are curious about ways to get more involved in athletics, so maybe not necessarily in the Flex, but maybe more soccer or badminton, but they maybe are thinking, well, I don't have a whole team. Can you speak to the benefits of kind of joining, and do I need a whole crew, a whole team already to get started?
Yeah, so when we do our campus recreation, it's important to keep in mind that it's also a shared service. So all of our students on campus, regardless if you're Durham College or Ontario Tech, you might be a Durham student with a friend over in OT, you can sign up with them. And you don't have to know anyone to sign up for campus recreation sports. So we have intramurals that take place during the fall, and then another batch that comes in the winter. And so whether you are an individual signing up, you would just sign up, and then you'd be placed with other individuals, which would give you a really good chance to actually make close friends with those people who you've become a team with. It's also possible for you to last minute kind of join a team. If you figured out, oh wait, that person's actually playing the sport and I didn't know this, I can join their team.
Good idea.
So there's lots of ways to get involved, and you don't have to have a team. Just sign up, come out and have some fun. There's a lot of people who are going to be in the same boat as you, who don't have a bunch of people to join with, but they still want to play.
And I kind of like that aspect. That's what I was thinking of when you said individuals. Well, then even breaking the ice is like, yeah, I don't know anyone else who plays badminton, right? Or neither did I. As much as that's just something small, that it's not joining a big team and I'm the only one who doesn't know or anyone. It's, I like that.
Yeah.
Even just sort of personally, I use badminton, but it was the same thing. I spoke to one of the people at the front desk, and obviously it's difficult to play badminton on your own, and I don't know any other staff that played. And they said, actually, we just spoke to someone a few weeks ago who said if anyone comes along, and then we played badminton for a good amount of time on a fairly consistent basis anyways. And it's like, nice that you can reach out or sign up for a team in that way. That's great. And so just overall, like, where can students find more information about all of this in terms of, registering or signing up and so on, or asking questions? How can they connect?
So campus recreation is going to be your quote unquote Bible here on campus for anything athletics and recreation related.
Okay.
So the website for that is register.crwc-dcot.ca.
Okay.
But
mouthful.
Very easy to find through the Durham Lords website. Okay, so if you were to navigate to the Durham Lords website, you go to the recreation tab, and from there you can go over to intramurals and extramurals.
Okay.
So all the information that you might need just for like a brief summary will be through the Lords website.
Okay.
And then from there you can go over to the campus rec website where it will give you specific information on all the intramurals being offered each semester.
Okay. And is that where you would find information, like you're mentioning the flex videos and those kinds of things? Where would you find that kind of information?
So those ones would be on the Campus Rec Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason why we don't post them to those websites is because, one, I don't know how to, but we have so much more followers on Instagram.
Gotcha.
And then for those people who, maybe don't like Instagram, we also post to Facebook too. So, staff and faculty who don't have Instagram, they're still seeing what we're posting.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us today,
welcome.
Brianna. And for those of you that are maybe feeling a little bit of pressure to step in, know that Brianna and the Flex crew are wonderful at helping to reduce some of that first-time jitters. And as you mentioned, returning members as well as you refresh all that wonderful equipment.
Yes.
Yeah. Coming up after this short break, we're going to nerd out and dig into the science behind social pressure. Let's explore from an evolutionary perspective where this pressure is coming from. See you after the break. Welcome back to the WellPod at DC, live from the Media Hub on riotradio.ca. We got a nice little gift from Marisa, our previous guest from the start of our show. And just to reiterate, that really awesome acronym to remember around consent. Feel like getting sexy? Make sure you get FRIES with that. So FRIES stands for freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and as Craig already guessed, specific. So talking about the pressure that we can sometimes feel, not just with sexual encounters or going to the gym, making new friends, this idea of social pressure. Craig, what's going on in our brain when this social pressure hits and we feel this pressure inside? What's going on in our brain?
Lots of things, but it's really fascinating as we prepared and thought through kind of, more the evolutionary biology side of things, of like who we are as a species, right? We're a social animal. We're making connections. Well, we've discussed it many times on the show in terms of connecting and so on, and some of which overlaps with this. But all that to say, we're a social animal because right from the get-go, when we're first young, right, we don't have words yet and so on, but we're still figuring things out. Our brain is trying to figure out, right, safety and so on. And so it comes down to this is how we survive, right? Sort of big picture, I can say, oh, we're social. Like if I need help, you help me out with something or whatever. That helps me survive, if you will, right? But right from a get-go, of course, when we're just a tiny little one, right, it's about figuring out what's safe and who's safe, in terms of seeing what's around us and who I can trust, who I can't trust, and so on. And at first, as a young one, if you will, right, it's kind of a recognizing family versus stranger, right? If you think of like stranger danger aspect, it's like, okay, who do I already know and therefore am safe with, and who is stranger and I don't know them yet, so avoid, at least for now, until maybe something comes along, right? And it is tied to how our brains function from hormones going on in there. We've talked about oxytocin before, that connection hormone, right, that you experience with loved ones and so on, helps you feel connected. This is what we're learning about when we're first young, right? Being connected to a parent, let's say, or our parents, right, would be, oxytocin's being released. Okay, this is safe. Versus I go into a situation, I don't know that person. Well, then we have, adrenaline going on in terms of that fight or flight response, right? And so from a evolutionary standpoint, like that helped us to survive, of recognizing, again, stranger versus a friend or family.
Yeah.
And then as we develop, that starts to change, of course, because we're not young forever. We get a little bit older, and then from some of what I've sort of read about and even experienced, you get to those teenage years, right? Okay, now I'm not as, how do I say, tied to family.
Dependent, maybe?
Dependent is the better word, right?
Yeah.
And so that experience of, who am I, and starting to engage with more people outside of maybe tighter circles. And it becomes somewhat of the same thing in terms of just trying to figure out, maybe not as basic as, stranger versus family or friend, but starting to figure out, okay, where do I fit in? As we tend to talk about in terms of teens and teenagers starting to become a little freer and be in other groups and so on, and recognizing things about people and how they treat you and so on. It's a huge part of our life, right? And it's, again, on an evolutionary level, it's about that change in life. I'm starting to, not that teens move out of the house necessarily right away, but like I'm starting to become freer and become more independent, maybe I'll say.
I would imagine too, we stop relying so much on our family's cues for those indicators of like, this is a safe person, this is someone I want to spend time with, or I can, seek comfort in. I would imagine what's happening in those adolescent years as well is we're depending on our own intuition, our own senses to guide these connections.
For sure. And then with that, but there's still that social aspect. Not that you're not saying that, but it's interesting because in our culture, right, it's like, oh, I'm a teen becoming more independent. Yeah, but you're not becoming fully independent,
Yeah.
sorry, but it's,
Yeah.
you know, you're figuring out beyond your family and beyond your, you know, friends from when you were young and so on.
Yeah.
So it's really,
You're just now taking your social cues more from maybe your peers and other environments, but there's still that kind of social feedback happening.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so even then, beyond like teens, is when we get into new situations, like even thinking about a new job,
Yeah.
right? You go, let's just imagine the day you started here at Durham College, right? It's, okay, I have to figure out who these people are. What's the hierarchy here? I'll say beyond the, you know, who's my boss and who's, you know, maybe I'm their boss, but what's the hierarchy in terms of the interactions of people within a department or whatever the case is, right? And figuring out, okay, who do I have, the term I came across was an affinity towards, right? Who do I kind of get along well with and like, for lack of a better way of saying it, right? And so you're figuring those things out as well, which still kind of goes back to even what we were saying about teens, but as you said, coming from the community maybe more so than just our family, right?
Yeah.
And then the values, right? Okay, what are people's values? I'm sitting back and saying, okay, Heather is someone who's trustworthy. Okay, I can talk to her about things versus, you know, I'll use myself, right? Craig, a little bit, maybe I won't share certain things with him as much as I'm being silly, but we're constantly figuring those things out because it goes back to survival as much as it evolves, if you will. I shouldn't use that term, but adapts over our life, right? It kind of does tie back to our evolution of our species of, okay, this is the life cycle and the social cycle, if you will, as well. And I came across some really interesting research then, kind of coming back to the question of what our brains do in terms of social pressure and so on. And it was called Ostracism, Consequences and Coping by Williams and Nita, 2011, so a little bit older, but it had some fascinating points within it. And they included when we're with a group and then we start to experience like being on the fringe, right? Maybe a little bit of rejection really by the group, right?
Yeah.
People don't hang out with us as much and so on. It was interesting because what they found and other research had found is it's actually affecting the same part of your brain when you have physical injury occur.
Wow.
Right? So you're actually experiencing some of those same feelings of I'm hurt.
Yeah.
Like when you know, if it's like we get along, if you were to say something, you know, very mean to me, it's like, oh, I'm hurt. We say that. And as much as that's a language thing, actually our brains are experiencing hurt, same as if you like physically, you know, punched me or something.
So like a
that.
punch to our gut is being responded in our brain in similar regions as being kind of punched out of a social group.
That's right. If you've ever used, I mean, maybe we're a little older and we use that lingo and it doesn't come up much anymore, but you know, oh, I felt you know, like I was punched in the gut because I didn't see that coming, you know, and that person came and whatever, you know, sort of really ripped into me and, you know, told me off kind of thing. And I felt, punched in the gut. There's actually a psychological connection to that feeling that is quite interesting. So, I thought that was, it's not something I've thought of before myself. So it was interesting to come across.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then kind of tied to that then, some of the research that they got into with the ostracism is kind of how we, or what goes on with us and how we deal with that or not deal with it in some ways too. But they kind of mentioned 3 processes that go on. So the first one is, you know, even that initial act of being ignored, being on the fringe outside of the group, as we're kind of talking about, goes back to that physical pain. Even just, 2 to 3 minutes of exclusion. And we start to feel that like, oh, they're kind of not talking to me, you know. That part of your brain that actually experiences physical pain is the same part that's lighting up, like even with that just real quick interaction. And it can linger beyond the 2 or 3 minutes in terms of like, okay, well, I'm sure you've probably experienced as I have why were they not talking to me today? What did I do? Or what's gone on? Or whatever the case might be. And then they discuss, like, then we move to, like, okay, how do I cope with that beyond the processing of, maybe what happened is, well, two sort of angles. People tend to take one of two angles, I mean to say. That's, how do I get back into the group?
Yeah.
What do I have to do? And some of that kind of at least partially relates to some of what we're talking about today of, like, how do I fit in? Maybe I can't say something, as Marisa mentioned earlier, right? Maybe I can't say something because I feel like a need to fit in and so on, even though, no, you're independent, as she said, you have your own voice and can say, this is one of the ways we sometimes cope as well.
Yeah.
And then the other extreme, or not extreme, but the other aspect is, okay, I'll do something else.
Yeah.
I'll find another group. Which may be just bouncing off of Brianna and the sports, right, on campus is, okay, well, I've kind of maybe fallen out of my group. Maybe I join an intramural team with some activity that I enjoy, so that gives me some connection there. Worst case, sometimes, though, in terms of the moving to another group, they also talked about a not so great idea, which is lashing out at the group that originally rejected you.
Maybe not recommended.
Maybe don't do that. Let's just make that very clear. But what I also, all of it I found fascinating, but then it was the long-term effects of rejection. And again, some of which we've talked about previously in terms of how our bodies deal with stress.
Yeah.
And so now I have this rejection. Maybe I don't really connect with someone else or something else that I'm involved in. And maybe I do feel lonely. And what goes on with your body, it was, people end up not being able to complete difficult tasks, sometimes if it's extreme, even basic tasks at time, right? Just drained of energy and so on, just due to that stress. Poor sleep quality, which sort of compounds that as well. Impulse control can be an issue then, right? Especially maybe tied to that lashing out of, I'll show you, except really it's affecting the person who feels rejected, right? And then a lower functioning immune system. So we talked about that for sure with stress of the cortisol and all the stuff that goes on hormone-wise there in terms of, okay, well, that suppresses my immune system. So now, why am I sick all the time? It's actually tied back to I felt rejected by this group, or I got not removed, but like removed from the group. And now I'm lonely and stressed, and now I'm starting to get sick too, right? And so it's just, for lack of a better word, interesting how it ties together. But more importantly is that importance of connecting with, whether it be sports or clubs on campus or whatever the case happens to be, in order to feel connected with maybe a new group, because that's what happens sometimes with life.
Yeah. That pressure to fit in and find that belonging. To end our show today, just wanted to mention some really interesting studies, because there's something that talks about the misperception to social connection. So a study in 2017 found that college students actually overestimate how many friends their peers have. And so about 48% of first-year college students believed that their peers had more close friends than they did. So college freshmen, especially if this is your first year here at DC, one of the things we want to leave you with is just recognizing that you're kind of plunged into this environment, and not only might you feel off kilter and vulnerable as you're getting to know your song and dance here at DC, but you might be feeling some pressure to make it a good time and make all these great friends. And that saying, make fast and furious, fast and forever friends, can add a lot of pressure. So making friends in college needs to stop being romanticized. It's not mandatory that you click with a group of people immediately or at all. Instead, we recommend focusing on appreciating the different experiences and adventures you can have here while at college, and really have a natural and not forcible experience with these social connections. Giving into this peer pressure can make you feel like you need to make friends really quickly, and sometimes jeopardize your own values and your own choices. So one of the things that Craigie mentioned is really leaning into understanding your values and seeking those out that share those with you. So this is the end of our episode today. Some of the tools and discussions will be posted on our Instagram account at wellness@DC. Don't forget, you can email your questions to be discussed anonymously on air at wellpod@durhamcollege.ca. Next week, we'll continue to talk about aligning our values as we talk about academic integrity. You can follow the Media Hub on social media at DCSA Media Hub. Stoked for the start of Season 3. Thanks for exploring what it means to be well with us, and we'll see you next time live on the Media Hub on riotradio.ca.